Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Very Cold Lasagna podcast, your place for all those filthy casual takes on the world of sports. I am your host, DylanLasagna. This is episode number 175 of this icy yet spicy sports podcast. And in this episode, we're here to talk about the weekend that was the 2023 NFL Divisional Playoffs. Playoffs? Yes, playoffs. We're here to talk about more playoffs that happened this past weekend. Is the semifinal portion has wrapped up, and now we're well on our way to the Final Four, the championship round of the NFL playoffs. So that being said, before we talk about these divisional games, a little bit of housekeeping before we get things started. I really want to get the ball rolling with my divisional playoff recap. But before we do, make sure you follow the show on social media, on Twitter and Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not Twitter anymore, it's X, but nonetheless, if you're listening to this on audio, for all my audio listeners out there, make sure you rate and review the show. Give it a 1 to 5 star review. I'm giving you all more love on the audio side of things, especially with this playoff coverage, and hopefully more episodes beyond that. But nonetheless, for all my audio listeners out there, make sure you rate and review the show. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you like the video, leave a comment, share this with your friends, share this with your stranger, share this with a neighbor, share this with, well, whoever you want to share this with. And most importantly, smash the subscribe button and just spread the good word of mouth, or maybe even the worst one, about this show called Very Cold Lasagna. And of course, share your own takes in the little comments down below about whatever I talk about here on this show. So that being said, let's talk about this divisional weekend in the NFL playoffs. The Elite Eight of these teams that I talked about had some past demons going into the playoffs. You know, there was one team that had a past demon of what happened last year in the NFC title game. We'll get to that team in a bit. And then there's another team that really couldn't shake off the snake bitterness of trying to overcome the hump for one particular AFC team. And then there was the other top-seeded team that really hasn't gone to the promised land, that being the AFC Championship game, and they're looking to do that for the first time in at least for hosting purposes. And then there's the other AFC team that they're facing that has never, ever been to an AFC title game. So something had to give. Someone was going to conquer their demons going into the next round of the playoffs. So that all began with the AFC divisional matchup on Saturday on ESPN as the 4th-seeded Houston Texans took on the top-seeded Baltimore Ravens in a rematch of their Week 1 meeting down in Baltimore, which the Ravens won over the Texans handedly at home. And that was C.J. Stroud's, the quarterback for Houston, C.J. Stroud's first real NFL start. And that was also Lamar Jackson's first game since getting that big fat contract extension in the offseason. So this, I thought, it was going to be an interesting game. I thought it was going to be a lot closer to the hip. And it was. It was in the first half because, both teams, they were at a stalemate to start this game for much of the first quarter, trading punts, trading field goals, and there was a near turnover by the Houston Texans, but Kyle Hamilton dropped a would-be tip interception prior to that Houston field goal at some point in the first quarter. But then you see Lamar Jackson and the Ravens kind of getting going on the ground in the second quarter. They were burning the Texans defense. They get a touchdown to Nelson Aguilar at the goal line. They take a 10-3 lead. On the other hand, you have C.J. Stroud in the Houston offense really struggling in this game against that very relentless, that very brutal Ravens defense. So they continue to go 3 and out. And that Ravens defense is just tough, man. It's just really tough. But despite all of that, you get closer to the end of the first half, and now it's the Ravens' turn to really start to stumble a bit. That Texans defense, it's now getting some stops that it needs, And their special teams got a big play in before the end of the half. It counterpunched the Ravens with a big 69-yard. Nice. I'm just kidding. A big 69-yard punt return from Steven Sims, and it tied the game at 10 before the half. And, they could have gotten more points out of it. They could have taken a lead-changing field goal, but unfortunately, Kaimi Fairbairn missed the field goal, and, well, they just really couldn't do anything after that. Although they did get, actually, I take that back, they sacked Lamar Jackson big time, back-to-back, as the first half ended 10-all. So, yeah, a very sluggish first half. It's on offense for the Texans at least. But, going to the second half, they gave themselves some solid momentum in the late stages of the second quarter that could perhaps wake their offense up in the second half, as long as they made the right adjustments. Meanwhile, if you're looking at the Ravens in that first half, they started off strong. They were pretty good on offense, like shades of what they were doing in the regular season, but they were unable to shake away from the pressure of that Texans defense that was being thrown in their face in the late stages of that first half. And now the pressure was on. It was suddenly a 10-10 game after allowing a special teams gaffe on their end. So pressure was on if they want to avoid this upset. So the Ravens actually managed to do that. They took away said pressures off of themselves with a second half opening drive. Lamar threw a dart to Nelson Aguilar, Isaiah Likely, Rashad Bateman, and then he decided to take it in for himself to the end zone. Now he gave his team a 17-10 advantage early in the third quarter, just like that, where the Texans still managed to struggle on offense. They just cannot get anything going against that Ravens front. Yeah, their offensive line is really beat up. They cannot handle the crowd noise. So it really seems like they really are struggling with pretty much just everything at this moment with this young Texans team. But the Ravens, they managed to settle in offensively. They go on this long drive that goes into the fourth quarter. Isaiah Likely catches a floater in the end zone. And yeah, that's pretty much your ball game. 24-10. And then Lamar Jackson and Justin Tucker stat pad the score. And it ends up being a 34-10 game when it's all said and done. So, for the Texans, their deficiencies, it was just too much to overcome. They were already beat up on both sides of the ball. I think they lost a few starting offensive linemen heading into this in some point in the season, and they were really beat up on defense, but they still managed to fight. But unfortunately, the better team just came out of it in the end. So that being said, CJ Stroud struggled all game long because the offensive line really couldn't hold up, like I said, against the best defensive front remaining in the NFL, that being the Ravens. And then there are other deficiencies beyond him. Running back Devin Singletary, there was a reason why the Bills let him go on free agency. Barely netted anything positive. What happened to Dameon Pierce? That breakout rookie running back from last season. What happened to him? So that made the Houston offense one-dimensional. Meanwhile, defensively, they just made a lot of mistakes. A lot of neutral zone infractions, a lot of offsides penalties. Too much of that to give the Ravens 5 additional yards on each and every third down conversion. And they also lost a lot of key players in this one game alone. So for the Texans, it's not all doom and gloom. Yeah, it's gonna hurt losing this game and not making it to the AFC Championship game. But you have a very good coach. You have a very good quarterback. And if you continue to build around these two, the future is very bright for the Texans. But as I just said moments ago, it's up to them to build and learn from this. And hopefully, I really hope they will, because this Texans team is actually very exciting to watch. Meanwhile, for the Ravens, they managed to come back to life in the second half after having a sluggish first half. So this is good for the Ravens. After shaking off that rust after not having actual in-game action for like 3 weeks. They got the ball rolling. They didn't seem phased by what the Texans was giving to them, at least for the second half. So they managed to come back to life from the opening gun in the second half and really took control once they did. And that's not even the best part of it for the Ravens. Now that their season is extended, they're getting their top option back, Mark Andrews, potentially for the AFC title game. So if Andrews is officially cleared to go, then I don't know how their next opponent is going to be able to stop him. Like, really? I really don't. Because look at all those weapons now that have really stepped up. Not just behind Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Aguilar, Bateman, Beckham. Like, the options are endless for the Baltimore Ravens. It's like they're going to need their offense to go full throttle if they're going to get back to the Super Bowl next week. So the options are endless for the Ravens. The only thing stopping them is themselves. So next, let's talk about the next game because the Ravens have already secured their home game for next week. But what about the other number one seed? So let's talk about the NFC divisional matchup, the first one. And that consisted of the 7th-seeded Green Bay Packers going up against the top-seeded San Francisco 49ers. These two teams did not meet each other in the regular season, but this is the 10th overall playoff meeting between these two teams. And the last time they met each other 2 years ago, it was a lot of interesting stuff that happened in that game. And just to cut it short, special teams played a big factor in that one, in that snowy ass Green Bay, and the Niners came out on top to go to the NFC Championship game. So this time around, it was in rainy ass Santa Clara in Levi Stadium. So weather once again playing a role in this one, but in this case, it was playing a role in the way that the 49ers were playing. But more on that in a bit, because the Packers started this game winning the coin toss again, and just like they did last week, and just like they did for however many times they did late in the season, they wanted the ball, and it is in the infamous Tim Hasselbeck saying, they wanted the ball and they were gonna score. So they did end up scoring on their opening possession. They only scored 3 points. I mean, the Niners red zone defense did its job, but they still got 3 points out of it. So, whereas the 49ers offense was really struggling in this one to start out the game, Jordan Love and the Packers would once again reach the red zone again early in the second. But rather than take the points and take a 6-0 advantage, they elected to go for it on 4th down and perhaps try to extend the drive, then get a bigger advantage. But Jordan Love was denied on a quarterback sneak. So, Niners saved themselves for a bit. So when you look at Brock Purdy, on the other hand, in that Niners offense, they're really struggling. And to count on those struggles, make those struggles worse for them, they had lost their one of their top receiving options in Deebo Samuel to really make that offense flowing. So he got dinged up out of the game with what was initially ruled as a concussion, but later was ruled as a shoulder injury. So Brock Purdy, he led the best drive so far early in that game. Gave the Niners a 7-3 lead. Dropped a bucket to George Kittle. And now you get to later in the game. Towards the end of the first half, the Niners had the opportunity to take a bigger advantage. A bigger 7-6 advantage. More than just a 7-6 advantage. But I really, like as I said in my dedicated review on YouTube, I really disliked how Kyle Shanahan played the clock here. He really fucked up the clock management, because it was like a little bit over minute 40 when the Niners were like getting close to the end zone, but it was just like dude, you have all 3 timeouts. Green Bay's not calling one, and rather than like continue to do chunk plays, you're just like milking that clock down, and then you're not even gonna call a play. I'm not gonna even do a play. I'm just gonna call a timeout. Like, what are we doing here? Like, what are they doing here on 3rd and 2? And you're just going to milk that shit down. So he runs a couple more plays down to the barely 10 seconds, and then goes for the field goal. And then instead of getting a 10-6 lead, it stays at 7-6 because guess what? Jake Moody. But actually, it's not actually his fault because that shit got tipped at the line. So, not necessarily his fault, but still, I really disliked how that got handled by Shanahan. So, going into the next half, the Niners really continued to struggle on both sides of the ball. Meanwhile, for the Packers, Jordan Love and them were thriving in the rain and thriving off of their mistakes. Now, all of a sudden, you see them taking a 13-7 lead. So even when the Niners responded to retake the lead at 14-13, they still had no answers to stop the Packers. They kept sliding, like it was a slip and slide. When you go out in the summer, you dust off the slip and slide from your garage, and then you put out some water, and then call out your kids like, "Hey kids, let's go out and slide on our chests." I'm just kidding. But anyway, Jordan Love, he converts another touchdown to Tucker Kraft at the goal line, and then he heaves it up to Aaron Jones to convert the 2-point conversion. And now the Niners are forced to go get a touchdown because they've see themselves down 21-14 as the third quarter winds down. But then this is where things start to turn in their favor because Dre Greenlaw picks it off on Jordan Love. That's Jordan Love's first mistake of the game. And then going to the fourth quarter, Jake Moody actually makes a field goal. He actually made a field goal over 50 yards to cut the lead down 21-17. Next, the defense that has been struggling all night, that has been slipping and sliding. They finally forced the Packers to punt. The first punt all game early in the first quarter. And then Green Bay kicker, much late in the game, Anders Carlson, another rookie kicker, by the way, he missed a pivotal field goal from 41 yards out. It was missed to the left. So a field goal that would have forced another touchdown disadvantage for the 49ers. Anders Carlson missed it. So looking at this game, looking at where they were at right now for the 49ers and the Packers, the Niners were hoping that Brock Purdy would finally wake up. And hey, he did. He saved his best for last, for as bad as he has been. So he goes on a game-winning drive that saw some clutch throws to Juwan Jennings, Ayuk, and Chris Conley, all two of them being the reserve receivers. And then he calls for Dr. Christian McCaffrey, CMC. And then on 3rd and 1, with a little bit over a minute left, he punches it in to give the Niners a 24-21 advantage. So now you look at Jordan Love, and people are telling him, hey, you got a chance to really define yourself. Define yourself as a hero, man. And unfortunately for the Packers, that did not happen because it was actually first and 10. They already converted a 3rd down. So that's a little bit of correction from my review. So he made his worst throw of the year on a first down with, I think it was like a little bit over 50 seconds to go. He threw up a bad floater, a bad pass, in where nobody was there really, to Dre Greenlaw, second interception of the night, and one that iced the game in the Niners spot in the NFC title game, 24-21. But I gotta tell you, man, even as a Niners fan, I gotta give my tip of the cap to Jordan Love and the Packers because they absolutely played like they deserved to be in that title game rather than us, man. Yeah, we made the most critical plays of the game, but for most of that game, for like 58 minutes, a lot of the Packers, where they were at that point in the season, they played with conviction. And look at where they were mid-season. They looked like they were ready for the offseason. Jordan Love was struggling. The receivers couldn't get anything going. They didn't have Aaron Jones for much of the season because of injuries. And keep in mind that A.J. Dillon was not only struggling, but also dealing with injuries as well. And the defense, led by Joe Barry, the defensive coordinator, was also slowly starting to fade. But this last month or so, they proved us all wrong because, well, yes, there's still room for improvement from not just Jordan Love, but from everyone else. He proved that the Packers potentially have found another diamond in the rough in Jordan Love. Jordan Love has made a lot of smarter decisions other than, what happened in the divisional and precise throws. Aaron Jones is there. You got a lot of diverse weapons with like Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave. There's plenty of receivers in the game for Green Bay. So it looked like the Love and the Pack were just that close to pulling off the impossible. And for 58 minutes, it looked every bit of possible. So for Green Bay, yes, their season is over for their fans. But rest assured, they will be back. They will be back. And for now, they have some decisions to make in the offseason. Like, do you extend Jordan Love? Do you let him ride that 5th-year option? A couple of free agents. Do you keep Joe Barry, the defensive coordinator? Some decisions to make if you're the Packers going into a now very important offseason. Meanwhile, for my 49ers, I said this before in my review. I'm probably going to say it again. While they did not deserve to win this game, let's be honest here, they came in clutch. They came in clutch when it mattered most. Rust in the weather, yes, it sure played a factor, but it shouldn't be an excuse for not only how unprepared they were for most of the game, but when the opposition played in those same elements and were playing much better. But nonetheless, they made the plays that mattered the most, especially from Brock Purdy in that offense and Dre Greenlaw on defense. Now they're back in their 4th NFC title game in 5 years. But it's not going to matter when they played like this next week against whoever they were going to play, whoever won that game on Sunday. So everyone on that Niners team is going to have to play way better than this game if they want to make it back to the ultimate goal, which is the Super Bowl and winning the Super Bowl. So they're going to have to get a much better effort from what happened in the divisional game if they want to get back to the Super Bowl. So we're going to find out who the Niners were going to play in the NFC Championship game. The last NFC Divisional Playoff game on Sunday, which kicked off the Sunday slate of divisional weekend in Detroit. Yes, that is right. Detroit gets a second playoff game, and that involved the 4-seeded Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the 3-seeded Detroit Lions. And this was a rematch from their Week 6 meeting in which the Lions beat the Bucs in Tampa. But now this time around, it's in Detroit. It's in Ford Field. They get their Winter Slam of sorts. I'm trying to play off some words of SummerSlam, but nonetheless, this is a big playoff feel for Detroit. They're on the verge of making that first NFC Championship appearance in over 30 years. Meanwhile, for the Bucs, they get an opportunity to go back to the NFC Championship game and potentially one without Tom Brady and since forever, like over 20 years as well. So nonetheless, to cap that off after what felt like a turbulent season for Tampa, it would feel good for them. But first, they would have to duke it out to fight for the right to face San Francisco in the NFC title game. So there were some big plays that were made early on in this game. Safety CJ Gardner-Johnson for the Lions, making that very first impression of the day, securing a tip pick off of Baker Mayfield early in the first quarter. But the Lions couldn't capitalize on it that much. They were only limited to just a field goal, but they had the 3-0 advantage. From there, it was pretty much a stalemate. And it was all tied up at 3 going to the second quarter. But then they got a little interesting. Jared Goff led the Lions down the field to get his team up 10-3 through a bullet pass from 9 yards to an open Amon-Ra St. Brown. Where was the Bucs defense on that one? But nonetheless, it was 10-3 Lions. And then midway through the second quarter, the Bucs put together their best drive of the game because prior to that, they were really struggling in pass protection, defensively, pretty much all facets. The Bucs put together their best drive. And after being held to just a field goal attempt, unfortunately, went right back to being down the dumps for them because Chase McLaughlin, the kicker, his kick went and hit the upright. So it stayed a 10-3 game. So unfortunately for the Bucs, it started to get really, really mellow, really fainty for their hopes. But they turned the corner. They turned the tide of the game for a moment because they sacked Jared Goff on third down after the 2-minute warning, forcing a punt and giving the ball back to Baker Mayfield in the offense. And from there, they went full 2-minute drill. They killed the biggest weakness of the Lions, and that was their secondary. They got 2 big passes into Mike Evans, and the second one being key to set up the touchdown to tight end Kate Otten, dropping it in the bucket, and tying the game at 10 going to halftime. So hold on a second, folks. This game is not quite over yet. It's only halftime, and the score is tied at 10. And the Bucs, they look poised to score again coming out of the half. But this was kind of baffling. Like on third down, they were like within field goal range, but then they allowed an ill-advised sack. Like I don't know if it was the lineman. I think it's both. The right tackle allowed Aiden Hutchinson to go scot-free, but then Baker Mayfield didn't see Aiden Hutchinson coming. So either way, you can't be taking that kind of sack on third and short, and let alone not even throwing it on third and short. So they have to punt. And then, Jared Goff didn't fare that much better either, especially with him missing one of his key offensive linemen. And then there was another one that left to injury, although he ended up coming back. But the Lions ended up getting together. They marched back down near the end zone, and Jared Goff got another goal line touchdown to Craig Reynolds. They're back up 17-10, but the Bucs were right back there to answer. Despite their own wounds, Baker Mayfield also nearly taking an intentional grounding penalty, because his butt almost touched the ground with nearly nobody near within the ball when he threw it. So he made some big plays though to retie the game at 17. One of those was the pass to Kate Otten to get the ball near the red zone, and Kate Otten made a great effort to keep that ball in bounds with the tiptoe effort. And then Rachaad White, he walked in untouched after a pass and catch from Mayfield, and then that tied it up. But then the game went into potential shootout potential because, they were right there to respond. A quick drive, like less than 10 plays, because right as soon as that the Tampa scored, I know it's kind of all over the place, Jahmyr Gibbs got a 30-yard run to give the Lions the lead back, 24-17. And then, just like I said, when we thought we were going to get a shootout in this game, just when we thought Tampa was going to respond, the Lions said, nah, because they forced them to punt, and then they started to dish it out They started dishing out a bunch of chunk plays, get him back into the red zone eventually, and then Jared Goff lobbed it up to Amon-Ra St. Brown, and it might have been the capper, 31-17, with a little bit over, I believe it was like 5 minutes left to go in the game. But hold on a minute, folks. Hold on a second, because Baker and the Bucs were not ready to quit yet. They were not ready to sink their ship just yet, because they cut the lead. They cut the deficit to 31-23 with just a little bit over 3 minutes left. But then I didn't really agree with this decision, though. This decision was really questionable. Like, they, rather than go for a 31-24 disadvantage, they instead decided to go for 2. I'm not sure why Todd Bowles wanted to go for that. I don't know, especially when they failed. They failed that 2-point conversion, and Mike Evans was looking for pass interference when, it was a little behind, but it's not the call you should be making with so much time left on the clock, and you have your full complement of timeouts. So that was a very bad decision by Todd Bowles and that Bucs team, because it would have been different if you were just go for the field goal, and then all you would need was a touchdown to tie the game up, take it to overtime, and then you got one more chance to potentially tie the game up. But unfortunately, they blew it. Baker Mayfield threw an open interception to Derek Barnes, and that sealed the Lions' ticket to the NFC Championship game for the first time since 1991. Over 30 years, the Lions are going to the conference championship game as they beat the Bucs 31-23. So let's start with the Bucs. I think they played hard in this game, but unfortunately, just one too many mistakes. They just made too many mistakes that cost them this one, and that's why they're not going to the next round. So the defense that had been hampered all year, they were gashed in pretty much all phases. They could not find ways, other than a couple of sacks or two, they could not find ways to slow down Jared Goff and that white hot Detroit offense. Ooh, I knocked my water down. I was like having a brain fart, and then now my water gets knocked down. Good thing it wasn't open. But nonetheless, they just couldn't find ways to slow down that Lions offense. And then meanwhile, offensively, Mayfield, yes, he had some good moments, like that 3 touchdowns to keep the Bucs alive, but he held onto the ball for too long. There were some missed opportunities from him himself, like 4 sacks. He allowed for himself to get sacked 4 times and made 2 killer interceptions. One to start the game, and then the one that sealed their season. But nonetheless, they made it this far in a season that looked lost for some points at the season. And well, here they were. They made it this far. They were like within reach. They were that close within reach of making it to the NFC title game. So I think, despite this loss, I think the Bucs should do all they can to re-sign Baker Mayfield in the offseason. Probably not to a big fat contract, like, with the likes of obviously not Jalen Hurts money, Mahomes money, Josh Allen money, but, to a modest contract extension, a new modest contract, depending on what the money looks like. But you also have to get some more help on the defensive end in order to, if they want to get back into the playoffs and possibly go further. I mean, Baker Mayfield's not an elite quarterback until he proves otherwise. But until you can fix those things, then it's probably going to be the same result for the Bucs. Meanwhile, for the Lions, well, what else can you say? You got to be proud for where they are at this point of the season, at this point of juncture, because they're doing something special, man. Despite some of their flaws, like you never would have thought that the former laughingstock of the NFL is now in the NFC Championship game. But if they want to have a chance to do something even more special, they're going to need their defense to really step up. They're going to need their defense to play like they did, but even better, to have a chance in San Francisco. And I'm talking about their secondary. It remains suspect, but they're going to need a lot out of that pass rush to pull away in that NFC title game. They got a crap ton of pressure on Baker Mayfield, and that pressure led to a lot of errant throws, some sacks, 2 key turnovers. So there's something that they could build upon. That 49ers offensive line, as we saw in that divisional game against the Packers, it's coming off one of its worst showings. So if the Lions can repeat that in the NFC title game against Brock Purdy, who surprisingly was like stuck in quicksand in the pocket for a lot of that game, if they can keep him in quicksand for that game, the Lions can have a real chance at making a statement upset, and they could find themselves going to the Super Bowl for the first time ever. So now, at this rate, yes, anything can happen in the NFL. So the final conference game that we're going to talk about here, the final divisional game that we're going to be talking about here, is another matchup that we were all interested in, and that was an AFC divisional rematch between the 3-seeded Kansas City Chiefs versus the 2-seeded Buffalo Bills. This rematch, not just from their Week 14 meeting, which the Bills won in Kansas City, but more importantly, a rematch from their memorable 2021 divisional playoff game 2 years ago. The Chiefs won that game in overtime to advance to the AFC title game. Now, if you're the Bills, yes, it's in your place now. It's in Buffalo. But regardless of that, even with that, even though I picked the Bills to win this one, would the result be different or would it be the same? Even though the Chiefs are playing their first road playoff game, their first true road playoff game under Patrick Mahomes, could they make the result different? No matter the place, no matter the location. Could the Bills finally get one? Could they get one to go to the AFC Championship game against their biggest rival they can never overcome in the modern era? So they got off to a shaky start though, but they managed to get 3 on the board. And there's a little bit of shakiness, not just on the Bills side, but on the officiating side, because there was like at least 1 or 2 plays where the Bills really got away with a lot of stuff. Including one controversial play where Josh Allen lateraled the ball past the line of scrimmage, and he threw it. He lateraled it to running back Ty Johnson, but some were quick to point out how the Bills should have been flagged for an illegal forward pass because, I don't know, in my opinion, he kind of threw it backwards to me, but then, yeah, I guess also the argument that it was a tad bit forward, but either way, they didn't challenge it, they didn't flag him. So we're moving on. So the Chiefs tied it on their opening possession. They kept it at a field goal. And then right from there and there, the Bills were right back in scoring position. They pounded the rock on the Chiefs. That running game for the Bills really excelled with Dalvin Cook, Ty Johnson, and that also included Josh Allen himself. And he got the score for the Bills that gave them the 10-3 advantage early in the second quarter. But the Chiefs managed to get back in the end zone themselves on the ensuing drive. Actually, the red zone, actually. But the passing game stalled. It was still out of sync. And they had to settle for a 10-6 deficit. So no touchdown for them quite yet. But they did manage to get their footing in a little while later. They take the lead 13-10. Mahomes finds Travis Kelce wide open for a touchdown. I'm not sure why the Bills defense was like nowhere near Kelce. Like it was like busted coverage. Nobody's there. Like what are they doing? But as been the case for much of that first half, Josh Allen led the Bills right back into scoring position in the 2-minute drill. Allen walked it in himself once again after James Cook botched the walk-in touchdown from earlier. So the Bills are up 17-13 going to halftime. And yeah, I mean, I had something to say about the Bills. Oh, this might be their time, might be their thing, but it was only halftime. Anything could happen. Because, well, as I said that, the Chiefs didn't back down. They didn't back down. They didn't quit. They put on their best John Cena because it only took them 6 plays. Literally 6 plays to get into the end zone. And half of those plays, it got them into the red zone. So it only took 3 plays for them to get back into scoring position. And 3 plays later, it only took a Travis Kelce screen to retake the lead 20-17. But for the Bills, it took them a little bit longer to respond, but nonetheless, they overcame some early down and red zone woes to have Josh Allen make a needle threader. He literally had to thread the needle to throw it into the arms of receiver Khalil Shakir from 13 yards out, who it was nearly out of bounds, but just barely by the thick of his skin, got it into the arms, and the Bills were back up 20-14. And this was becoming a back and forth chess war to see, well, it's probably going to come down to who is going to have that last score, who's going to make that one mistake. More on that in a bit, actually. So the Chiefs once again answered. Isaiah Pacheco notched a goal line touchdown to retake the lead 27-24. And now this is the point where, yeah, that chess battle was really going to come into play. Who is going to make that one mistake? Well, we all thought it was the Bills, because when they were forced to go 3 and out, when they were forced to punt on that next possession, they made a really stupid decision. Like, why were they going for a fake punt deep in their own territory? They were like on their own 30, and they elected to have Damar Hamlin run it on 4th and 3, and he was like stopped. He was like really stuffed. Like, why? Like, you can't be trying that kind of stuff in this environment. In a regular season game, whatever. Like, it's fine. But still, you cannot be doing that in such a big environment when you know it's going to probably fail. And yet they did it anyway. That's a bad decision made by head coach Sean McDermott. They were very lucky, though, that the Chiefs failed to capitalize, because receiver McCole Hardman fumbled the ball out of the end zone, and then McDermott challenged it, and then he got what he wanted. He fumbled out of the end zone and gave the ball he gave the ball back to the Bills. So they couldn't capitalize on that, though. They had to punt, and it was a bad punt, but in fairness, the punter was hurt already a week prior. So the Bills had to make a stop, because their defense was already struggling, and they haven't been able to stop him all night. So that's what they did. They got their biggest stop with 7 minutes left to go. They finally forced Mahomes and the offense off the field, got him to punt, and now we had to get that big question out of the way. Could Josh Allen finally get that one big drive in to go and knock off their biggest demon in Mahomes and the Chiefs? And for at least 6 minutes, it looked like they were well on their way to doing that. They ran the ball down their throat. They got some good chunk check down passes in to convert enough first downs. And they were like right there in the thick of near the red zone. And they were right there. But then they started making some very questionable throws, Josh Allen being, with 1 minute 50 left. And then 3 downs later, they were forced to settle for a potential tie. And it looked like they were going to get that potential tie. But nope. Instead, they faced an so familiar fate. Because Josh Allen couldn't get those throws in wide open. So instead of checking it down, chucking it, and stretching the drive a little bit longer, they instead, with a little bit over a minute 40 now to go, they faced some familiar fate from over 20 years ago. The 2 famous words in Buffalo: wide right. So Tyler Bass missed the tying kick wide right, and the Chiefs knocked out the Bills 27-24 after they get 2 key first downs, and that sets up a date with the Ravens in the AFC Championship game. Well, that pretty much answers my question. So, yeah, the Bills get their home divisional playoff game against the Chiefs, but different place, same result for the Buffalo Bills. So, for the Chiefs, pretty much the same story for them. They were the more balanced team. Like, sure, they endured a couple of key injuries on the defensive end, but they made the plays when it mattered most. They stopped Josh Allen. They forced him to a lot of pressure-induced throws, a lot of mistakes. So they pretty much did what they need to do defensively. Offensively, not exactly the best performance out of them, but pretty much, as I said with the defense, they made the plays that mattered most. They got the scores in the plays that they needed most. And also, another key to victory that I mentioned, reintroducing Travis Kelce as a force to be reckoned with. They did that in this game. So they started to get Travis Kelce more involved. So they got that too. So the Chiefs, once they also started getting Travis Kelce involved with Rashee Rice, hey, there you go. Meanwhile, this game is more so about the Bills, because my God, kudos to Kansas City, but my God, the Bills had so many opportunities to win this game, and just like last year, just like in the divisional game, 2 years ago. They blew it. And I know the initial indication, the initial blame was that most people on social media, most people on TV were going to place that blame on Tyler Bass because he kicked it wide right. Oh, he did the thing that happened 20 years ago too. But that they shouldn't even been in that spot to begin with. Look at how many opportunities they had to win that game beforehand. Josh Allen yeeting it to Stephon Diggs, and Stephon Diggs didn't catch that. He didn't secure that ball. And when they were making that final drive, several minutes later, Josh Allen had Stephon Diggs wide open on second down, but instead he didn't trust him. He didn't target him. He instead nail it. He decided to throw it to Shakir in the end zone, and he failed. He threw it well below Shakir. He failed. I know I'm kind of stumbling my words a bit, but it's just like, damn. It's just kind of befuddling. Very disappointing at how baffling these Bills are. I know. It's so very disappointing that I can't even get my words across. So anyway, third down. He had two receivers wide open that could have gotten the first down, and yet he instead rolled right and dumped it again into the end zone. Like, don't you think that Josh Allen needs to be held accountable? Like, shouldn't that be your first instinct? That for as Josh Allen has willed his way to his team, like he's fought and scrapped his team into this game. That don't you think that he couldn't will them into the win? He couldn't come clutch when it mattered most. Yes, I like I said, he pretty much fought for the team, like for a full 58 minutes. But in that last minute, couldn't do it. Couldn't come up with the result that mattered most, and that was the win. So Allen in the offense had too many missed opportunities, and it cost them the game. It cost them a game that they could have won late. So that's why they're going home after the second round again for the third straight year. So this is a bonus point for them. This is a bonus takeaway from them. I feel like something's got to change. Something has to change for the Bills this offseason because, like I said, this is the third straight year that the Bills got eliminated in the second round, and that was because of their own doing. Too many mistakes, like too much self-inflicted wounds from their quarterback and their defense. And I get it, their defense was really beat up, but it's like they have to do something. They really have to get over the hump because at some point the higher ups have to start considering, maybe as soon as this coming week or next, some change has to be made. And I look at Sean McDermott, the head coach. Yes, he was a great shot in the arm when he first arrived. He got him slowly but surely into contention. But since that 2020 AFC Championship game that they came short in, he hasn't figured out how to get back there. His defenses have regressed. His quarterback is now choking in 2 straight divisional games. And he's making a good amount of mistakes, not just there, but in the regular season. That's nearly costing his team games and costing some games. And not to mention the fact that they were almost not in this spot to begin with because of such deficiencies. So I feel like at some point, where the front office, ownership, what have you, they have to start considering some changes in Orchard Park because you can't be wasting Josh Allen's prime of his career with how much they're coming up short. They're always coming up short in these last, 4 years now. It's going to be reaching 4 or 5. It's just so many. It's just so many now. It's like, I don't even know if you could call it cursed anymore because they're just like that one pin away from reaching the Super Bowl. Like, it feels like it's their year, but then it gets stripped away by their own doing. So I feel like something has to change. I really feel like something has to change for the Bills this offseason. And also keep in mind, they have a lot of key free agents. And they might have to do something about Stephon Diggs too. So a lot of things to consider for the Bills this offseason, as they now have to watch, once again, the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. So speaking of those title games, they are now set. The Final Four is set, ladies and gentlemen. So on the AFC side, you have the Chiefs and the Ravens. The Chiefs have to play another road game, as the Ravens are the top seed. So that should be an interesting matchup. Mahomes versus Lamar Jackson in Baltimore for the right to go to the Super Bowl in a Mahomes versus Jackson matchup, in where it matters most. And in the NFC title game, you have the Detroit Lions versus my San Francisco 49ers. The first overall pick from 2016 versus the last pick in the 2022 NFL draft. So some fun storylines to cover in these title games, and we're going to be talking about them here on Very Cold Lasagna this coming week, and should be interesting. Should be an interesting title games, pending they're not blowouts and stuff, but we'll see. And like I said earlier, anything can happen in the NFL, especially considering what happened this week on divisional weekend. So let me know what your thoughts are on this divisional playoff weekend in the comments below. Did your team manage to pull out the win, or did your team get sent home packing? Let me know in the comments below on YouTube, or if you're listening to this on audio, or if you're following me on social media, make sure you send me a message through DM. I'd like to know your thoughts, your take on divisional round weekend 2023. So yeah, very, very interesting, sometimes very stressful divisional weekend, but it was fun. It was a fun divisional weekend. So anyway, that is it for this episode of Very Cold Lasagna, episode number 175 of this icy yet spicy podcast. We'll be back to talk about several things to talk about. The 2 conference championship games. The Royal Rumble is this weekend as well, so I got something planned for that as well. And then the next week, we'll be doing the same shebang, recapping the championship games, recapping the Royal Rumble. So good stuff. So good stuff coming up in the next 2 weeks. So stay tuned for all that. But until then, keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge with your takes on the world of sports. Thank you again for tuning in. But until the next one, peace out.